The problems with the incarnation of Jesus. The incarnation of Jesus is a core belief of Christianity. However, there are logical inconsistencies with this idea, and I will explain them in this video. The incarnation is the belief that the eternal divine person of God the Son became united to a human body in the form of Jesus, and so Jesus has two natures, a divine nature and a human nature, and he is simultaneously fully God and fully man. Infinite and finite. Humanity is inherently limited and finite, whereas divinity is unlimited and infinite. If Jesus is both divine and human at the same time, he would have to be infinite and finite at the same time, which is a contradiction. It could be argued Jesus simply voluntarily limits his power in his human nature, but this would still make Jesus infinite and just pretending to be finite, as he still possesses the infinite power, and so Jesus cannot be logically infinite and finite simultaneously. All-knowing and lack of knowledge. If Jesus is God, then he should be all-knowing and so have access to all knowledge. However, Jesus seems to not know certain things in the Gospels which would make him not all-knowing. It is often argued that Jesus is simply voluntarily restricting his knowledge, but if he still has access to all knowledge, then he did not actually lack this information. Jesus specifically states that he does not have knowledge of certain things, which contradicts his omniscience. Jesus as a created being. If Jesus' human body is not eternal, as it was created at a specific point in time, and Jesus is fully human in his human nature, then this means that all of his human body's attributes can be applied to Jesus himself, including it being created. Therefore, Jesus can be described as a created being, which contradicts his godhood. Jesus was omnipresent anyway. If Jesus was God prior to his incarnation and God is omnipresent, then this means that Jesus was omnipresent and existed everywhere in space and time before his incarnation. Therefore, it would be redundant for Jesus to enter the world and dwell in a human body if he existed everywhere in the world beforehand. How did Jesus not inherit original sin? Original sin is the belief that as all humans are descendants of Adam, they all inherit sin from Adam as a result of his actions, even from the moment of conception. Since Jesus is truly human, this raises the question of how he did not inherit original sin as a descendant of Adam. Jesus experiencing time. If God exists in eternity and is outside time, this contradicts the fact that the divine person of Jesus experienced time through his life, and so divinity was subject to time. While it is argued this was possible through Jesus' human nature, this still creates a logical problem, as a divine person cannot experience time. How did the incarnation happen with no time? If God exists outside of time, this means that no time occurs as we understand it, as events do not progress in a linear order for God. Therefore, there would be no time for God the Son to become human, so the incarnation would be unable to happen. Immutability. If Jesus is God, this means he is immutable, that he can never change. However, becoming incarnate as a human is the greatest change he could make. Old Testament contradiction. In the Old Testament, it is described that God cannot be human, which directly contradicts the idea of the incarnation, with Jesus being described as the Son of Man. Psychological problems. According to traditional Christian theology, Jesus has two minds and two wills, a divine mind and will and a human mind and will, with Apollinarians being excommunicated for preaching Jesus only has one mind. However, this raises questions as to how one person can have two minds and two wills, with one will submitting to his other will, and what this means. Incarnation broke at the cross. If Jesus is God united to a human nature, then this complicates his death. If Jesus' spirit left his body, then it seems his divinity separated from his humanity and his incarnation was broken. Characteristics across natures. If Jesus has two natures, then this raises the question of whether characteristics of his divine nature can be applied to his human nature, like if the body of Jesus can be omnipresent. If true, then his body has divine qualities and so is not truly human. If not true, then Jesus lacks the power to do this and so is not all-powerful and so not truly God. Natures are never affected by the other. If Jesus' divinity and humanity are not mixed and remain separate natures only united by the person of Jesus, then both natures are unaffected by the other. This means that when Jesus is born and dies, divinity is still separate and so only a human body is born and dies, so God is not incarnate and does not pay a divine sacrifice on the cross, as the divine nature does not die. Thanks for watching. I will make my next video about teachings of Jesus that are ignored by Christians as soon as I can.